The internet froze 1 minute ago. No build-up, no teaser, no warning. Just a sudden, unexpected statement from a man who has spent decades mastering silence. And what Ron Howard allegedly revealed has left Hollywood absolutely shaken. Phones started vibrating at once. Newsrooms scrambled. And insiders say this wasn't a planned announcement, it was a breaking point. Because Ron Howard doesn't speak unless it matters. For years, fans believed they understood his story. The success, the stability, the quiet brilliance behind some of the most iconic films ever made. But moments ago, that image cracked wide open when Howard reportedly broke his silence and shared a revelation so personal, so devastating, that even people closest to him were not prepared for it to go public. According to early whispers, his voice didn't shake, but the words did damage. A truth he'd buried for decades. A decision he's lived with in private. And a consequence that shaped everything we thought we knew about his career, his family, and his sudden recent distance from the spotlight. Hollywood insiders say the room went still as he spoke. No interruptions, no questions, just disbelief. Because what Howard allegedly admitted reframes entire chapters of his life and forces fans to rewatch his legacy with a completely different lens. Social media is already spiraling. Clips are being dissected. Old interviews are resurfacing. And one chilling line from his statement is spreading faster than anyone can contain it. I thought protecting everyone else meant sacrificing myself. What was he protecting? Who was involved? And why reveal this now? Because if even part of what Ron Howard just shared is true, then this isn't just a revelation. It's a reckoning. The moment Ron Howard finally spoke, insiders say it didn't feel like a press moment. It felt like a confession that had been waiting decades to escape. According to those in the room, there was no dramatic build-up, no rehearsed delivery. Just a steady breath, a pause that lasted a beat too long, and then words that immediately reframed everything people thought they knew about him. Because this wasn't about box office numbers or creative burnout. This was about a choice that haunted him, and a cost he paid quietly while the world applauded. What shocked listeners first wasn't what he said, but when he chose to say it. Ron Howard has always been the definition of controlled presence. Careful, thoughtful, private. So for him to break silence now, sources say, signaled that something had reached a point of no return. One insider described it as a man finally putting down a weight he'd been carrying since his 20s. According to early accounts, Howard began by acknowledging the version of himself the public knows, the child star who grew into a master director, the steady hand behind legendary films, the family man who never chased scandal. Then he dismantled that image piece by piece, not angrily, not defensively, but deliberately, as if he needed people to understand that the calm they admired was, in part, armor. The revelation, as whispered by those present, centered on a pivotal moment early in his career, a crossroads decision that altered not just his trajectory, but the lives of others around him. A decision made under pressure. A decision he believed would protect people he loved. And a decision that, according to Howard, demanded silence as its price. I thought protecting everyone else meant sacrificing myself. That was the line that reportedly broke the room. Because suddenly, the decades of restraint made sense. The refusal to engage in Hollywood politics, the absence from certain conversations, the projects he turned down without explanation. Insiders say Howard admitted that what looked like discipline from the outside was often fear on the inside. Fear that reopening the past would hurt people who had already paid enough. What made the revelation devastating wasn't scandal, it was regret. Sources claim Howard spoke about opportunities he walked away from, not because he lacked ambition, but because staying visible would have drawn attention to a truth he was determined to keep buried. He allegedly described moments where success felt hollow, not because he didn't love filmmaking, but because every achievement reminded him of the bargain he'd made with himself. As word spread, Hollywood reacted in real time. Text chains lit up. Agents called producers. Old collaborators reportedly sat stunned, realizing there were chapters of Howard's life they'd never been allowed to read. One veteran executive allegedly said, "This explains everything and nothing at the same time." Social media followed quickly, but not with outrage. With confusion, sympathy, and an eerie sense of mourning. Fans began reposting old interviews where Howard deflected personal questions with humor, clips where he emphasized team over ego, statements about serving the story. People suddenly heard those words differently, as coded, as protective. Then came the second layer of the revelation. According to insiders, Howard acknowledged that his silence wasn't just self-imposed, it was reinforced, not through threats or contracts, but through loyalty. Through the unspoken understanding that certain truths, once aired, can't be put back. He reportedly admitted that more than once, he'd come close to speaking sooner, but always stopped himself when he imagined the fallout for people who never asked to be part of his story. That admission reframed everything, because it suggested his silence wasn't cowardice, it was containment. As the room absorbed that Howard allegedly said something else that sent chills through listeners, the hardest part wasn't staying quiet. It was watching people guess wrong and letting them. That line alone ignited a firestorm online. Fans debated what guessing wrong meant. Wrong about him? Wrong about someone else? Wrong about an event that shaped Hollywood history in ways no one realized? Speculation exploded instantly. Some fans began connecting dots to long-standing industry rumors that never quite added up. Others revisited moments when Howard abruptly exited projects without explanation. A few even pointed to sudden creative shifts in his filmography, darker themes, quieter resolutions, wondering if those choices were subconscious confessions all along. But insiders insist the most emotional moment came when Howard addressed his family. According to those present, his voice finally cracked when he spoke about the people closest to him, not because they were harmed, but because they lived alongside a version of him that was always holding something back. He reportedly admitted that there were times he confused stability with safety and privacy with protection, and that the line between the two blurred over the years. That admission hit especially hard because Ron Howard has long been held up as the model of balance in an industry defined by excess. To hear him suggest that balance came at an internal cost left many shaken. Then, just as listeners thought the revelation had reached its peak, Howard allegedly dropped a final detail that shifted the tone from reflective to urgent. According to a source, he said the reason he's speaking now isn't closure, it's timing. That circumstances beyond his control are changing. That truths don't stay buried forever. And that he'd rather be the one to frame his story than let it be fragmented by speculation later. That single implication set off alarms everywhere, because it suggested this revelation isn't isolated, it's preemptive. Almost immediately, reporters began digging. Old documents were requested, long-forgotten projects were re-examined, industry veterans were asked questions they hadn't heard in years. And while no one has confirmed anything concrete, the shift in energy is undeniable. People are bracing for more. The most haunting rumor circulating now is that Howard's revelation is only the first layer, that it opens the door to a deeper truth involving decisions made at a systemic level, not just personal ones. And if that's the case, then what he broke silence about today may force others to confront choices they hoped would remain invisible. As of now, Howard hasn't elaborated further. No follow-up statement, no clarifying interview, just the weight of what he's already said hanging heavy over Hollywood. And perhaps the most unsettling part of all, according to someone close to him, Ron Howard didn't look relieved when he finished speaking. He looked resolved, which suggests that whatever comes next won't be about damage control. It will be about consequences. The aftermath of Ron Howard's revelation didn't unfold like a scandal. It moved like a slow earthquake, rippling outward in ways people didn't immediately recognize as damage. According to insiders, the minutes after he spoke were filled with stunned stillness, followed by a quiet scramble as everyone present realized this wasn't a moment that could be neatly summarized or safely ignored. Because Howard hadn't accused anyone, he hadn't named names, he'd done something far more unsettling, he'd implied context, and context in Hollywood is dangerous. Within hours, a new question replaced the initial shock. What exactly did he protect, and from whom? The ambiguity was intentional, sources say. Howard allegedly made it clear he wasn't there to expose individuals. He was there to reclaim authorship of his own narrative before it was rewritten without him. That distinction mattered, because it suggested a ticking clock. As word spread, industry veterans began revisiting their own memories, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Old meetings, decisions that never sat right, projects that disappeared quietly, careers that stalled without explanation. Nothing obvious, nothing illegal, just patterns that suddenly looked familiar. One longtime producer allegedly said, "He didn't accuse the system, he reminded us how it works." That reminder hit harder than any allegation ever could. Howard's second layer, insiders say, focused on the cost of longevity. He reportedly spoke about the myth of control, the idea that staying agreeable, staying quiet, staying productive keeps you safe. According to those present, veteran actors and directors reportedly reached out to him privately, thanking him for articulating something they'd felt but never named. Younger creatives reacted differently, with anxiety, because Howard's story suggested that even doing everything right doesn't guarantee freedom. Sometimes it only guarantees longevity. As the hours passed, a rumor gained traction that Howard's revelation was triggered by something imminent. Not a scandal, but a transition. According to one account, he's stepping away from a role or position that allowed him to maintain control over how his story was told. And with that shift comes vulnerability. If true, it explains the urgency in his tone. The speculation intensified when an old interview clip resurfaced where Howard said, "I've always believed timing is part of truth." That quote went viral overnight. Fans interpreted it as confirmation that what he shared now was deliberately incomplete, not because he was hiding, but because he was pacing the truth. Then came a subtle but chilling development. A respected industry figure posted a cryptic message that read, "Some truths don't age, they wait." No context, no follow-up. The post stayed up for exactly 30 minutes before being deleted. Screenshots, of course, spread instantly. The message wasn't attributed to Howard, but many saw it as an echo. The conversation shifted again from what happened to what's next. Insiders claim Howard is aware that speaking once invites pressure to speak again. And yet, according to someone close to him, he's not planning a media tour. No book announcement, no exposé series. That refusal only deepened the mystery. Because if he isn't seeking attention or catharsis, then why open the door at all? The answer, whispered by those closest to him, is agency. Howard allegedly said he didn't want his story to be told about him after he was no longer in a position to respond. He wanted to establish a record, incomplete but intentional. A marker that says, there's more to this than the headlines suggest. As night fell, the industry settled into an uneasy quiet. No denials, no counterstatements, just a shared awareness that something foundational had shifted. Not because a bomb was dropped, but because a pressure valve had been opened. The most haunting rumor circulating now is that Howard's revelation may embolden others. Not to accuse, not to expose, but to contextualize. To say, this is how it felt from the inside. And if that happens, the collective portrait of Hollywood's past may become more complicated than anyone is comfortable with. As of now, Howard has not spoken again. But according to someone who knows him well, he didn't intend to. He intended to start something, not a movement, but a reconsideration. And perhaps that's what makes this so devastating. Not that he revealed a secret, but that he reminded everyone how many secrets can exist without ever being illegal, immoral, or loud, just heavy enough to shape a life. And the longer that weight sits in the open, the harder it becomes for anyone else to pretend they don't recognize it. By the time the third wave of reaction set in, it became clear that Ron Howard's revelation wasn't fading, it was settling. Not exploding, not escalating, but embedding itself into the industry's collective consciousness in a way that felt impossible to undo. According to insiders, this was the moment when people stopped asking what did he mean, and started asking what does this change, because something had shifted. Howard's decision to speak, partially, deliberately, and without spectacle, forced a reckoning that didn't rely on accusation. It relied on recognition. People began to see themselves in what he described. The compromises that didn't feel like compromises at the time, the silences that felt temporary but stretched into decades, the belief that protecting the whole required diminishing the self. Sources close to Howard say this was the exact reaction he anticipated and accepted. According to one account, Howard privately acknowledged that once he spoke, he couldn't control what others heard. He could only control what he said. And that boundary, insiders claim, is what kept his revelation from becoming a spectacle. He didn't offer a villain because he wasn't trying to create one. He offered a mirror. That mirror made some people uncomfortable. As conversations deepened, a pattern emerged. Those early in their careers expressed fear, while those with decades behind them expressed relief. Veteran creatives reportedly described Howard's words as permission to admit the cost, while younger ones described them as confirmation of the risk. Both reactions were valid, and both underscored the same truth. Longevity in Hollywood often demands trade-offs no one advertises. One particularly resonant detail from Howard's statement continued to circulate: his acknowledgement that silence isn't neutral. Insiders say he described it as an active choice, one that protects some people while isolating others, including yourself. That framing reframed decades of industry behavior overnight. Suddenly, staying quiet didn't look like professionalism. It looked like participation in a system that rewards endurance over honesty. That idea spread quickly. Panels, podcasts, and op-eds began referencing Howard's words without naming him directly. Phrases like protective silence and narrative containment entered the conversation, not as accusations, but as concepts, tools to describe something many had felt but never articulated. Behind the scenes, the industry grew cautious, not panicked, but attentive. Studios reportedly instructed communications teams to tread carefully when discussing legacy figures, not because of fear of exposure, but because Howard's revelation reminded everyone how easily context can shift perception. A story told one way for years can suddenly be seen differently when someone reframes their role within it. And that reframing, insiders say, is exactly what Howard intended. He wasn't trying to dismantle his legacy. He was trying to complete it. According to someone close to him, Howard felt that his public image, while positive, was incomplete, that it omitted the internal cost of stability, the emotional math required to maintain trust and access in an industry built on leverage. By speaking now, he wasn't rejecting his past. He was adding depth to it. That distinction mattered deeply to those who understood it. One director allegedly told a colleague, "He didn't say the system is broken. He said this is what surviving inside it looks like." That sentence circulated quietly, passed from conversation to conversation, because it captured the nuance many felt but couldn't articulate publicly. The most unsettling development came when people began asking whether Howard's story was unique or simply one of the first told this way. Insiders say multiple industry figures reached out to Howard privately, not to ask for details, but to say thank you. Not because he exposed wrongdoing, but because he validated experience. Because he gave language to something many had lived with quietly, assuming it was just the price of admission. As one anonymous message allegedly sent to him read, "I thought it was just me." That message, according to sources, stayed with Howard more than any headline. Publicly, however, he remained quiet. No clarifications, no elaborations, no attempts to steer interpretation. That restraint frustrated some commentators, but those close to him say it was intentional. He believed that over-explaining would turn a lived truth into a debate, and debate would flatten it. Instead, Howard reportedly chose absence. And in that absence, speculation continued, but it softened. The tone shifted from interrogation to reflection. People stopped hunting for secrets and started examining structures. That alone marked a profound change in how the story was being received. Then came the final rumor, not sensational, but deeply consequential. A source claimed Howard had privately acknowledged that his revelation might cost him future opportunities. Not because anyone was punishing him, but because honesty changes how people are perceived. It introduces unpredictability. And in an industry that values reliability above all else, unpredictability is risk. If true, that acknowledgement adds a final layer of gravity to his decision, because it suggests he spoke not because it was safe, but because it was necessary. The last known comment attributed to Howard, shared quietly through an intermediary, was simple. "I don't regret the silence, I regret pretending it didn't shape me." That line didn't trend, it didn't go viral, but among those who heard it, it landed hardest of all. As of now, nothing else has emerged. No follow-up revelations, no corroborating accounts, no backlash, just a lingering awareness that something fundamental has been named, and once named, can't be unnamed. Hollywood hasn't changed overnight, but it's listening differently. And that may be the most devastating part of all, not that Ron Howard broke his silence, but that he proved how powerful silence can be, even after it ends. Because now that the weight has been acknowledged, everyone carrying something similar has to decide what to do with it. And that decision, to speak, to stay quiet, or to reframe one's own story, is one no one else can make for them. Ron Howard made his. The rest of the industry is still deciding. If you're still here, it's because this wasn't just another headline, it landed. This wasn't gossip, outrage, or spectacle. This was the kind of revelation that lingers, the kind that forces you to rethink what silence really costs and who pays for it. And here's the truth. Moments like this don't get clearer with time. They get buried unless people keep paying attention. So don't scroll away now. If Ron Howard's words made you pause, hit that like button immediately so this conversation doesn't disappear into the noise. Drop a comment and say what stood out to you most. because these stories matter when people engage with them, not when they're quietly consumed and forgotten. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Turn notifications